You know, 10 weeks ago, we started this whole issue with COVID-19, and it led to the shelter in place, what we've called a lockdown. At this point, we've called house arrest, but we were under the shelter in place in order to make sure that we didn't overwhelm the hospitals. And that was the purpose. That's what we were told. Wanted to flatten the curve, ensure we didn't overrun the hospitals. Well, we didn't overrun the hospitals. We basically had a hot spot in New York. Certainly didn't have anything here in Fresno. And in fact, St. Agnes furloughed doctors and nurses, about 200 of them. Now, that shelter in place wasn't removed. In fact, it's continued to be extended here locally. Now, as a result of the lockdown and non-essential businesses being open, we have seen 33 million Americans put out of work by government. We have seen 20.6% unemployment, and at the Great Recession in 2008, the highest we had was 10%. So we've doubled that. We're going to triple that. We have 3 million Californians out of work. We have tens of thousands in Fresno out of work. And we have a $40 million shortfall, at least on a conservative basis, locally. What that's going to mean, and remember, June 30th, we have to get a budget done. There's going to be furloughs. There probably will be layoffs. There was in 2008, and we've already doubled that number. There'll be reduction in services. Right now, we have people that can't answer the 911 calls, sometimes from 5 to 10 minutes. That will only get worse. Now, Fresno's shelter in place. It's been extended a number of times, most recently till May 31st. It's been arbitrary, it's been irrational, and it's caused tremendous confusion for Fresnans and people in neighboring cities. As I said, the mayor extended the shelter in place May 31st, and it caught others completely off guard. It caught council members off guard because they expressed they didn't want it extended to May 31st. It caught his task force off guard. It caught the incoming mayor off guard. And we've also seen very draconian code enforcement actions taking place amongst a lot of businesses, almost $40,000 in fines. We saw what took place at one business, the Waffle shop, where a patron who was expressing support was put in handcuffs and eventually has threatened a pending lawsuit. We've seen tremendous anger and frustration across our city. And this is what it's about. It's about our citizens that we represent. People who just want to go back to work, make a living, put food on the table. Now, some examples of where we've seen this very arbitrary shelter in place and lockdown. We've seen pet grooming stores here closed, but in Visalia and Clovis they were open. Auto showrooms closed in Fresno, they're open in Clovis. Gun stores closed in Fresno, they're open in Los Angeles. Golf courses closed in Fresno, they're open in Madera, Fresno County, Sacramento. Parks are open in many other communities, they're closed in Fresno. Now, when the mayor and the council, with their support, approved the May 31st extension in place, they put in some additional orders. One of the orders that, again, is very arbitrary, makes no sense, is that one customer per person for 500 square feet in a business. Now, that makes absolutely no sense. It doesn't exist in Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's. Go check it out. People are shoulder to shoulder. And yet that's a mandatory requirement, not being enforced as was being enforced with the owner of Waffle Shop, but it's not being enforced, and yet it's on the books, it's mandatory, and the new businesses have to figure out a way that are opening to allow one person per 500 square feet. It's arbitrary, and it's not being enforced. The mandatory wearing of masks, subject to misdemeanor penalties, a year in jail, or a $1,000 fine. There is no science to back up making it mandatory. The CDC does not make it mandatory for everybody to wear a mask. If you want to wear a mask, that's fine. But if you don't want to wear a mask, you should also be fine. The County of Fresno does not make it mandatory. The CDC does not make it mandatory, but in the city of Fresno, it's mandatory, and it creates tremendous confusion and concern for people. Now, what we need to do is we need to continue to do what others have done that have been very successful. We need to continue to isolate the elderly and those at medical risk with problems, particularly those in nursing homes and those with compromised immune systems. We need to end the unconstitutional lockdown and house arrest of healthy people. The arbitrary and unconstitutional decision-making of which businesses live or die must end. And by the way, the quarantining, the lockdown of healthy people for months at a time has never, ever happened in this nation's history, ever. So I'm going to be bringing legislation forward to repeal all the City of Fresno emergency orders, all of them. It'll be on the agenda for next week. What that will mean is that if the council supports it, and I encourage them to do so, the shelter-in-place will be removed, and we will be like every other city in Fresno County. Clovis removed their shelter-in-place. Fresno is the only city in the county that still has its shelter-in-place. And again, as I said, it's created tremendous confusion and anxiety for people. We need to remove the 1 person per 500 square feet in business. It makes no sense. It's completely illogical. The mandatory wearing of masks, subject to misdemeanor penalties, must be removed. Now, Fresno County will be submitting a plan to the governor on Friday to open up businesses in Fresno County, and they'll also have a plan for restaurants. And there'll be a lot of flexibility in that plan. It won't be just involving 6 feet. It'll be involving some real flexibility. It sounds like a solid plan, but it will be a problem in terms of getting approved if the city of Fresno continues its shelter in place, because the governor is going to see what we're doing, and they're going to be seeing what the county's doing, and it will be confusing in terms of not speaking with one voice. Now, having the city with the shelter in place removed, not having restrictive arbitrary orders, will help the county's chances of getting their plan approved. If we don't eradicate the shelter in place for the city, it's going to be a problem in terms of getting it approved with the governor. Now, the Fresno County Board of Supervisors have wanted this shelter in place removed from the city for weeks. It needs to happen. The County Board of Supervisors want this removed. And lastly, we need to open up this building. I will be here tomorrow in that chamber as I've been for every council meeting. I believe another council member will also be there. If council members want to stay home, they can stay home and call in on Zoom. But this building belongs to the citizens of Fresno. There's a tremendous frustration that people feel because they cannot access their council members. They cannot come and express their dismay at the policies that are being implemented that are destroying their lives, their livelihoods, and their businesses. There is no reason why we can't socially distance in that chamber. The mayor had a press conference a little while ago, last week or so, and it was in the chamber. People socially distance. There's plenty of room in the chamber for people to come and socially distance. And those council members who don't want to be here can call in on Zoom, just like we've been doing for weeks. The building must open. Now, I want to address what happened yesterday. You know, while we can have disagreements politically, and we do, very strong differences, I speak very strongly about what I believe and in support of my constituents. I was elected to do so. I'm going to continue to do that. And we can have different points of view, but it completely crosses the line of safety, decency, respect of personal and family boundaries when somebody shows up at the door of an elected official. It should never happen. And what happened yesterday, I hope won't ever happen again. I've been the recipient of it. It's very disconcerting when somebody shows up at your door, unannounced, and starts banging on it. I want to say we've seen this happen with people who are conservative. I've seen Senator Mitch McConnell be accosted in his driveway, and we've denounced it. We've seen a host, Tucker Carlson, have people show up at his door. We've seen the former press secretary of the White House chased out of a restaurant. I've denounced it every time, and it should be denounced this time. I don't care whether you like the person or don't like the person, agree politically or don't agree. This kind of behavior, frankly, is reprehensible. There's no defense for it, and it should never be allowed. So I encourage people who feel very strongly about things, who have grievances with City Hall or state government or federal government, you use what means you have, which is this place, the public square, to express your concerns, to express your disagreements. That's appropriate. That's what it should happen. It should happen here. It should happen in the public square. But never, never cross the boundaries of making people feel unsafe, neighbors feel unsafe, family feel unsafe. So I hope that doesn't happen again. And I'm very clear that what happened yesterday was a violation of people's family boundaries and personal boundaries. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Yes, sir.
Do you expect any of the rest of the council members to go along with your proposed legislation?
Well, I hope so. You know, listen, we have to get rid of the confusion in our city. There's a lot of confusion. We need to follow the recommendation of Fresno County Board of Supervisors, follow the lead of other cities like Clovis. I think people in Clovis felt a tremendous sense of relief when the shelter-in-place was removed. We have no other city that has it. In fact, we have cities that are opening up. We have Placer County, which is 400,000 people who have had, unfortunately, 8 deaths. And they have written a letter to Governor Newsom that says, we're opening up. And that's what we need to do. We need to have a strong, clear message from the county with one voice that says, we're ready to open up. They have a plan. If they submit that plan on Friday, which they're planning on doing, and yet we have more restrictive measures in place, which is what the orders are. They're more restrictive than what Newsom has. That's a very confusing message. It has to be removed.
Councilman, would you still accept the support of the association with the group that was involved in the incident?
When you say the group, which group are you referring to?
Ben Bertram and Jason Phillips and the others who were at the Monday news conference at the Waffle shop, and they were here last week.
Yeah, listen, they put together a rally. Ben Bertram put together a freedom rally, Fresno rally, a week or so ago. We had 300 people who showed up. It was an excellent rally. I spoke at it. Supervisors Brandow and Magzig spoke at it. You were there. There was probably 15 or 20 businesses that are struggling that spoke at it. There are lots of people who are expressing pride in this country, the belief in the Constitution, the belief that we've seen a very heavy hand of government here, an authoritarian approach, and they were expressing themselves exactly what gives us the freedoms to do. That's what the Constitution is about. So I support freedom, and I support people expressing themselves, and I'm very proud of what happened at the Fresno Freedom Rally. What I saw yesterday, I completely challenge and say was completely inappropriate.
In regards to the Arias incident, you tweeted about it, denouncing the incident, and a lot of people were responding that you instigated that based on the past events. Do you feel at all responsible?
Of course not. Absolutely not. I believe that people should express themselves, their point of view. I do. I fight hard. People who know me, I fight hard. But I respect people's different points of view. I may challenge it. I've been challenged as well. I'm open to always being challenged. I don't have all the answers. I do the best I can. But I believe and express what I feel. And I'm going to fight hard to end what I believe are these unconstitutional, draconian measures. And frankly, what has been an authoritarian approach by government like we've never seen before. And I think people are very, very concerned about it. I am. And as I said, 33 million Americans have been thrown out of work by government. 3 million in the state of California by government. Nothing that they did. Government. And while I certainly understood the first 2 weeks of this because we didn't know what we were dealing with, we are now 10 weeks into this and we know a lot about what we're dealing with, and yet people are still under house arrest. Some businesses are still closed. We have these arbitrary mandates from the mayor and city council that make absolutely no sense. It's not based on science. It's not based on data. And I'm going to speak out about that. And I'm going to defend the people who are hurting, because in our city, there is tremendous pain and human suffering. Tremendous pain and human suffering. And it's very easy for people who are getting checks, people who are elected here who get checks, to make policies that don't impact them. And so I'm going to be that voice. And if people like Ben Berquam or the 300 people support, my belief that people should be free to go back to work, I welcome that. When they do things like they did yesterday, that is completely unacceptable, and I denounce it.
Do you have specifics of what you plan to introduce next week?
Yeah, the complete eradication of all the emergency orders.
Will that include details for the real banning of all non-essential businesses, or what's called non-essential businesses?
It would be, yes, it would, and what it would mean is then it would fall under Governor Newsom's orders, which is what has been going on in Fresno County. And that's the way it ought to be, and then we should be pushing back on Governor Newsom so we can get these businesses open. When you enact your own shelter-in-place orders, your own mandates, that one, often are arbitrary, make no sense, and are even worse than what Governor Newsom does, that's a terrible precedent. That's what I've been challenging. That's what I've been fighting against. That's what I've been calling unconstitutional. And I have no doubt that when all the litigation works through courts, we will see a lot of things that have been unconstitutional. I saw today that a lawsuit was filed by Harmeet Dillon on behalf of the barbers and hair salons, stating that what they've done to them is completely unconstitutional. And I have no doubt it is. Yes?
You've had like half a dozen different press conferences that said basically the same thing every time. Why is today different? Why would they support you when they didn't support you before?
Well, I'm introducing the legislation. I haven't introduced it before. So I'm introducing it for Thursday. It is my hope that the Board of Supervisors will be able to encourage the mayor and the city council, which they too have not yet been able to do the right thing. Friday, they are submitting a plan to the governor. That's new. I don't think we want to be sending two different messages and two different mandates like what we have here with the Fresno shelter-in-place and all the orders that are in place in contrast to the governor's. That sends the wrong message. So what's different is the county is sending their plan to the governor, and we need to rescind our shelter in place and all those executive orders so we can be one voice in the county and hopefully get these businesses open.
I guess what I'm asking is,
Yeah,
the council hasn't been on your side during any of this.
sure.
Why do you expect it to be different?
I don't know if it will or not. I'm hoping that logic and common sense will rule the day. If logic and common sense and caring about citizens getting back to work rules the day, they'll do the right thing and rescind all these executive orders. The bottom line is I'm going to keep fighting right up until the last day that we have because it is the right thing. I and the people who are fighting this are on the right side. These orders are arbitrary and unconstitutional. There is no question about it. You don't rip up the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, because of a virus. Again, well, I said the first 2 weeks made sense. 2.5 months later makes no sense.
Have you spoken with the city manager or Mayor Brand about this? Because they can repeal the order as well.
I spoke to Mayor Brand yesterday. We talked about a number of things.
Speaking
Yeah,
about
it
the
does.
governor talking about that he re-emphasizing that he doesn't plan to allow counties to go past the state's order unless they meet a set of criteria, including testing, tracing capacity, and no deaths in 2 weeks. A lot of those Fresno County does not meet, as well as the city. Can you speak to me about what you are doing to try to get to that point?
Well, first of all, getting rid of the Fresno's shelter in place and all those executive orders is a step in the right direction. Having this plus his orders is confusing, number one. Number two, everyone has said that some of what he says is probably not going to be realized, which means while he's put that in place, I think there will have to be some negotiating that takes place with the county and the governor, and a lot of counties are pushing back on the governor. As I said, Placer County has said, we are moving forward. Other counties have done that as well. I think Fresno County needs to push back as well. That's the governor's position today. I hope that he's flexible because, as I said, Fresno County, unfortunately, has had 10 deaths, and that's a tragedy for everyone. But we are not the hot spot. And if we look across the country, places like Georgia that has opened up statewide, they have not seen a spike. So we have to use data. Data is what it's all about. And if we use data, we should be opening up. And businesses know how to open up. The restaurants are putting together their own plan. Many of these businesses that put in some of the plexiglass, some of the protections for when you check out, this was done by them. They didn't need to be mandated to do it. They know what to do to make their customers and employees safe. So we have to get back. We cannot just watch the economic and societal destruction of people's lives. We are seeing suicide going up, depression, anxiety. Child abuse is going unreported. Is anybody concerned about all the kids that are being abused in their homes because they're not in school now, and that's where those cases are reported? We've had a 900% increase in the national hotline. We ought to be concerned about all of that. Sure, we need to fight a virus. We absolutely need to. But there's other issues that are going on that are being ignored. We can't ignore them, and they're being ignored.
A couple of things, you know, just in the past week, Fresno getting a bad light in the national media in terms of two stories with the Waffle House as well as last night that made national news, really not making Fresno look unified or good. And so are you concerned about that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, when I saw the Waffle House, the Waffle Shop incident, I was horrified. Again, I think that had to do with the policies. So there was confusion. You had 3 code enforcement officers out there. Where do you ever see 3 code enforcement officers go out there plus a police officer? The Chief Hall has put out a memo that wasn't to happen. And so it certainly put us in a bad light. It's going to result in a lawsuit. I think that relates again to the confusion by having such a draconian measure in place that we have now from the city of Fresno. We shouldn't have it. Other cities have been much wiser and removed their shelter in place. That's what we need to do. We need to be one voice for Fresno County, and that's why I hope the city will do the right thing.
Councilman, did you have a police car at your residence last week?
I did.
Is it going to extend to this evening?
No, I don't believe so. I left and said, please patrol streets. Any other questions, ma'am? Okay, thank you very much.